Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. This is our first day on the job site and a brief overlook of what we're going to be doing here. These steps right here are going to become concrete. We're going to remove these railroad ties, this broken concrete on the edge, and set up some steps in this area. That's one stair section. We have 3 stair sections. That one happens to be the smallest. Hi, David Odell here. What we have here is the makeshift staircase. Not real user friendly. Kind of dangerous going up and down it. We're going to take it all out. We're going to set in some concrete steps, poured in place, and we're going to make a curve. We're going to work the hillside exactly as it is. We're not going to change the hill at all. So in order to do that, after I remove all this stuff, these railroad ties and broken concrete, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my length of this run, and then I'm going to get my height, and then I'm going to determine how big my treads are going to be and what height my steps going to be to get to each one of these levels that I want to get to without having to change a lot of stuff. I don't really want to disturb the hillside, in other words. And I want to end and start, pretty much where it is now. So each one's going to have a slightly different step height and maybe a slightly different width on the tread to make these hills work. Also, we're going to be pouring a retaining wall in place with the stairs all simultaneously. So we're just using a little sawzall, reciprocating saw actually. Cut those railroad ties out of there. We've got some sprinkler lines going across. We're going to dig that down, put a couple 90s and get it below the top of concrete. Even below the bottom of concrete would be nice. So we have a little curve here. We have 3 steps right now, concrete steps at the base. We're going to attach that and go up the hill. But here's the process. We're going to have to cut a few plants back because I want a minimal of 3 foot wide stair tread going up here. I'm going to actually go about 3 foot 3 inches. So we're going to be putting hand railing on this as well because anything over 2 steps requires a handrail by code. So we're going to have to put handrail in here on each one of these landings because they're all more than 2 stairs. That's the retaining wall we're going to be pouring in place with the steps. This is a hillside basically. It's a good 20-foot rise, maybe a little bit more. And here I am establishing the height. Now I've already determined the length, the height of the step, and the width of the tread to get from point A to point B. I just ripped, so this is just some 1/2-inch plywood. It bends real nicely for this. Probably about a 40-foot radius, I guess, something like that. So 8-foot panels, 1 foot wide, I just ripped them and slapped them in here. This is the ripping process of the plywood. The nice thing about the 1 foot rips of if I was doing another staircase, maybe a neighbor or something, I could just drag these entire panels to the next location and reuse it over and over and over. Now this particular, the top staircase, I actually had to cut notches where the actual step risers are going to go because we're doing a monolithic. So on that side, on the retaining wall portion of it, the throwaway, I didn't really throw it away. I just flipped it over and threw it on the other side. Even though it's not going to match up, it's still going to work. It's going to still hold the concrete. So I'm utilizing everything. There's really no scrap, in other words. Now the tricky thing about pouring these retaining walls monolithic with your staircase, with your steps, is being able to strip it. I mean, framing, is framing, and you don't want it to come apart typically, but when you're framing for concrete, you want it to come apart, but you also want it to be strong. So it's a whole different way of thinking when you're doing formwork for concrete, because you have to take this out while it's wet. And now if these risers were tucked in the inside of that plywood, you'd have a hard time getting them out. In other words, it wouldn't come out because the pressure of the concrete would get so tight that you wouldn't be able to get those risers out without cutting them to strip. So it has to be set this way to the outside of your face of the retaining. Then you just back it up with something, a little cleat on the backside to hold it. This is my longest run right here. I had about 15 steps on this one. So that's a pretty good run without a landing. I'm just going to use all screws on this because that plywood's under a lot of pressure. You start trying to bang on it with nails, it's going to crack. Really, you don't need a whole lot of stakes on something like this when you form it like this, because it's all supporting itself by the screws holding to the risers. You're holding the outside formwork, and then in the plywood, the weight pressing downhill is hooking up to the plywood, and that's locked in at the bottom against the existing concrete. Another thing I'm going to do with this, because I don't want the concrete to slide down the hill, after it sets or you get a lot of rain or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a post hole digger. I'm going to punch a bunch of holes a foot deep all over through the staircase, and then I'm going to run some steel up into the actual stairs. So they're like earth teeth, kind of like a big molar into the ground. Whole bunch of them. Here's the risers right now that I'm ripping. I got some 2x8 and I ripped her down to about 4 3/4, something like that. Now that piece, that little sliver there, I'll utilize as bracing. By the way, this is actually going to be a 4-part series. Part 1 is the actual demo is setup. Part 2 is going to be the pour. And then we're going to get into part 3, which is the retaining walls on this hillside. We're extending the height of existing retaining walls, and we're matching the stucco. And then we're going to also show in another part the hand railing going up on this whole project. And it's going to all be curved hand railing, same as the concrete. In between each one of these staircases is future concrete landings in between each run. That we haven't done yet, and you won't see the landings in between the staircases in this particular series, because that's probably a phase 2. Here's the post holes going in. I'm talking about I'm putting 2 post holes every 5 feet down each staircase. Now here's that scrap that I ripped for my risers. I'm just going to utilize that to reinforce that retainer, and at the same time it's holding the width of those stair treads. So we backed up the concrete truck up this hill right to the pump. That bracing there holds the steel stakes as well as the risers. Little combination effect there. Now all those risers actually bracing for the retaining wall portion as well. There's the post holes. I found some steel stakes that was up here that were actually holding some of the railroad ties, the steel stakes. So I threw those in the post holes as well in a couple locations. We got number 3 rebar, 3/8 running the length of this. Because concrete typically, it's not going to crack the long ways down this run. It's going to crack the short distance across. So you only need steel, the opposite direction. Anyway, thanks for watching this. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2, which is the pour. And we're going to get into the retaining wall add-on. And then we're going to also show the hand railing, how to fasten that retaining wall to the existing block wall with the epoxy. So it's going to be interesting. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notified when we upload. And if you like it, hit the like button. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.